I'm Kevin, and I'm joined by my co-host with Harrison Bader like hair.
Yeah, it's a weird ordeal. Katie is just proving to be childish.
Which is why I don't feel I would give $5 million to Jack Campbell.
I don't know. Baseball is one of those sports where anyone who makes the playoffs really can be a contender.
I think the Padres definitely do it.
I don't think Donovan Mitchell gets traded.
Kyrie Irving does have the track record of not being a great locker room fit, or even good locker room fit.
Bader got some luscious locks. I gotta say it.
This is Zach Bigley, the broadcaster for the Frisco Rough Riders, and you're listening to Outsiders Opinions with Kevin and Austin. You guys better subscribe.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to our NFL Opinions of the Week. We titled this the Running Back Dilemma. We went deep into the stats. We will give clarifiers, but the man I'm going to hand the ball off to, Austin.
Kevin, this has been a pretty big debate that we've had. We definitely, not everything are we completely opposite on, but I do think this is one we're pretty polar about.
Yes, and my issue is I do think if they changed it, which may be for another video, the running backs could get paid, and I would be in favor of paying running backs. But to me, it's you kind of get to 5 years. That's just kind of the age of the running back. But and I think it's easy to replace them compared to other positions where I have to spend a high quality pick. Because if you look at quarterback, even if you use a high quality pick, you can still be wrong.
Well, I mean, Tom Brady's the best example of that.
Yeah.
So you can go wrong, or you can go extremely right. You have to take a quarterback really high, but it doesn't always work out. And
yeah. What were you going to say?
Well, I was also going to say Aaron Rodgers was a second round pick, and there's other guys late first. That's right.
Yeah, late first.
Yeah. But almost every team could have had a chance to take him.
Yeah, I feel first round pick is kind of what you want. I think that's kind of the same for wide receiver, same for defensive end. I think there's a higher success rate with taking guys for taking.
But I do also think that we think there's a higher success rate because so many guys are taken. Like if we look at starters in the NFL, how many percentage do you think are first rounders? Because I mean, I can already think of a good bit that aren't. When you think of Kirk, Dak Prescott, both of those are fourth round guys. You have Sam Howell now for the Commanders is going to be their starter, and he was a 6th round pick.
But are they top 5 quarterbacks?
I think top 5 is being very exclusive.
Well,
I would say. I mean, you and I both. I mean, do you think Kirk's top 10? Right? Did you have him in your top 10?
He's borderline top 10.
Okay, well, Dak and Kirk, Tom Brady forever.
Well, yeah, but Tom Brady there are always exceptions. But when we looked at our running back rankings, when we got to the top.
I mean, but you can say the same thing about wide receivers. When I think of the best wide receivers, not all of them are first rounders.
Yeah,
you go to Antonio Brown was a 6th round pick.
I'm interested in wide receivers, and I don't know if I can just replace wide receivers. That's something I'm very interested in. I don't think I can replace a top-notch wide receiver.
I think you can. It just depends.
Okay.
But let's get into we'll have a wide receiver talk in the future.
Yeah, I am interested, and I figured out an idea for that. But so stay tuned for that. But yeah, so I'm looking at championship. We looked at championship winners of that year and looked at stats, and I did find something interesting when we get to it. There are some teams, but it's earlier on because I do think the running back change was slowly over time, but it's peaked at this moment where Saquon Barkley signed a deal, but it was only $1 million more than what he would have gotten on the franchise tag, and Josh Jacobs is still has no deal.
Yeah, that's true. One thing I want to get out the first punches. I would like to say the Chiefs this season have the highest yards per attempt of any team. for rushing at 4.7.
Okay. Yeah, I did it by ranking. So they were 11th this year in yards on average, 24th in attempts, and 20th in total rush yards. So for the listener, I have rushing stats. Austin has passing. I haven't seen the passing. I'm curious on what the passing looks like over the years.
So do you want to start at the beginning?
Yeah, I was gonna go from this year back to 2013.
Okay.
So yeah, Chiefs really didn't prioritize running the ball, but I understand when you have Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking at rushing right now. Yards per attempt, the Chiefs are 8th. Rushing touchdowns are 7th. But for passing, yards are first, touchdowns are first, and that's partially because you have the MVP.
Yeah. Wait, was that yards per attempt? They were 6th in
8th
rushing?
in rushing yards per attempt.
Okay, I have 11th. Huh. It's weird.
On Pro Football Reference, it has yards per attempt. Yeah, they were 4.7. They had 1970 yards, 18 touchdowns, which is 7th. But you are right. Rushing yards, they were 20th. But yards per attempt, they were 8th. So when they did run the ball, they were extremely efficient.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, that's something. Yeah, I must have mistyped on that one. Then we go to the Rams last year. They were 25th in total rush yards, 23rd in attempts, and 25th in yards attempt.
This is a team that was 5th in passing yards, 2nd in touchdowns. But I would like to mention that they're one of the worst teams interception wise. So they are 27th,
Yeah.
which means that there's only 5 teams below them at not turning over the ball passing wise, which I do think matters because rushing the ball, they didn't have an overbearing amount of fumbles.
Yeah, it's just what it looks like now, and I want to see how this expands. Is bottom, they're both 20th in total rush yards and attempts, but I thought when looking through this, teams would be higher on their yards per attempt.
Yeah, but like I said, Chiefs are 8th in yards per attempt, while the Rams are 25th. The Rams really did
Yeah.
not run the ball proficiently, and I would like to mention fumbles lost. The Rams were the second best in the league. They did not lose fumbles.
Okay.
So while they threw a lot of interceptions, 18 as a team, my fault, which was, like I said, 6th worst in the league. They didn't turn over the ball rushing, which I do think is very important.
Yeah, that is important. And to clarify more, we're looking at we're looking at Super Bowl winners because I think when you're a team, your goal is to win the Super Bowl, and it's a copycat league. So what do the teams winning, what do they share in common, or what's one thing? Do they all have a great running game, or this is just something I was curious in? I want to see, do they all have the same thoughts on running backs or running game? Because if they don't value the running game, why would you pay one guy for a running back? Pay one running back is kind of my view of this.
Yeah, and we can go on to 2020. For passing, 2nd in touchdowns with 42, 40 of those by Tom Brady at age 43, which is nuts. Also 2nd in passing yards. So they were proficient, but they also did throw some picks, but they were extremely good at not turning over the ball. 8.9 turnover percentage, which is one of the best in the league.
Okay, and then rushing side, 29th in total rush yards, 29th in attempts, 26th in yards on average.
Yeah. I don't know why my stats are different. I see 28th in yards and 25th in yards per attempt. They are 15th in rushing touchdowns, which means they're top half of the league. And I do think that's pretty common, though, because a lot of good teams score a lot of touchdowns. And rushing is something that I do think is extremely, extremely proficient in the red zone.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why. Are the teams around them, are they the same yards on average? Or no? Are the teams around the Bucks the same on yard on average? Or is it different?
Can you repeat that, please?
So 26th. So I'm at 26. What are their teams at like 27, 25? Is it the same number on yards on average?
I don't know. I'm looking at the team page. So the team page has
Okay.
an offensive ranking, team stats and rankings. It has league rank offense, and it says, for example, for the Bucks, 25th for yards per attempt.
Okay. Gotcha. I just went to the year and then I went to rushing offense. So that's where I got it.
Okay.
And then I would just focus on that. But yeah, that's weird. That's the only stat. But now we go to the Chiefs again. 23rd in total rush yards, 27th in attempts, and this year only 20th in yards per average.
Yeah, and I would like to mention for this team, they allowed the fourth worst yards per attempt against rushing the ball. So they allowed over 2,000 rushing yards against. This was not a great defensive team, while the 2022 team was allowing only the 15th, so top half in yards per attempt against, and did not allow many touchdowns, only 10 against. So they definitely have gotten better at rushing over the years. But for their passing stats, they were fifth in TDs with 30 and fifth in yards. So top five, not top of the league, but definitely really good.
Okay, so has everyone so far been top 5
No,
passing or no?
not in yards. No. Oh, wait.
Not in yards.
Yes, actually, not in attempts though. Attempts
Okay,
can
not in attempts.
attempts. I mean, for example, for the Chiefs, they were 15th in attempts, which is just barely over league average.
Yeah. Wow, I would have thought they would have been higher.
So they're not really throwing the ball with all that often, compared to other teams. Now, obviously, a lot of teams are throwing the ball often. It's just like, for example,
they
again,
weren't as
2022
successful.
Chiefs threw the ball the fifth most, while again the 2019 Chiefs threw the ball the 15th most, which is not much.
Okay. But yeah, so far, this is where I think we kind of have a year change, or there's a change in the stats. Everyone,
Yeah, I would like to say though, really quickly, that the 2022 Chiefs seem like an outlier of the teams that we mentioned. So 2019 to 2022, the 2022 Chiefs are top 10 in two really big rushing stats, while
Yeah.
all the rest are not. All the 2021 Rams are actively like extremely bad at running the ball, while the Bucks are just average, and the Chiefs are just average in 2019. But the 2022 Chiefs are actively a top 10 rushing team, which is surprising.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. But yeah, when I see the highest team with total rush yards was the Chiefs this year, 20th and 25th, 29th, 23rd. But this is where the change happens, and it's something I thought Tom Brady, since this is a correlation, the New England Patriots won that year. They were 5th in total rush yards, 3rd in attempts, but 17th in yards on average.
What's something I want to mention too is that this was a committee backfield. The Tom Brady's always had committee backfields. No team, even though they had a good bit of rush yards, not a crazy amount. Like they were top 5, but they weren't first or anything. But a committee backfield, no one had. So they had over 2,000 yards rushing. No rusher with 1,000. So while yes, the rushing yards are more, the idea behind it is extremely modern. I would not be surprised to see a team like this next year, because they're running the ball with a lot of different players. For example, Sony Michel had the most yards at 931, but then you have James White at 425, Cordell Patterson at 228, Rex Burkhead at 186. That's 4 guys that are running backs nowadays with a solid amount of attempts, and the touchdowns are also spread out a lot. So James Devlin had 4, Sonny Michel had 6, James White had 5. And then to go into the passing stats, it's still extremely good in passing. 8th in yards, 11th in touchdowns. So top 10 really, and that's partially still because you have Tom Brady.
Yeah, and then we get to the Eagles. They were 3rd in total yards, 6th in attempts, and then 4th in yards on average. And the thing that to me that's sticking out is the change in attempts in these past 2 years, the New England and Eagles years, because that means you're really trying to set the tone with running, but they're also successful with their total rush yards that they accumulated.
Something I would like to mention about the Eagles that makes them an extreme outlier is the fact that they started a backup quarterback. And normally, when you start a backup quarterback, you run the ball more. So those end of the season, the last like 5 games when Nick Foles played a lot. I mean, you can think about the Cooper Rush games. They ran the ball more when Cooper Rush is the QB. And I would like to point that out as that's probably why the attempts are up, at least partially.
Yeah,
And
that
then
that is a good point. But then you got the passing stats.
yeah, they were first in touchdowns passing. So they were the best passing team in the league touchdowns wise. Yards, they were 13th though. So they threw a lot of touchdowns but didn't throw a lot of yards. I'd still say they're a top 10 offense because you have the most amount of touchdowns and the 6th least interceptions with only 9. So they're extremely proficient. One of the best turnover percentage teams as well. But they're still a really, really good passing team.
Yeah, and I wonder if that passing yards dip because, like you were talking about, running the ball more with Nick Foles.
Yeah, Nick, I do. I agree. I mean, those last, like I said, 4 games, 3 games, 5 games, or really 3.5 games. I'll say 3.5 games that he played. They did throw the ball less. If you go by yards per game, Nick Foles threw for 76.7, while Carson Wentz threw for 253.5. So it definitely dipped significantly when he was hurt.
Yeah. And then we get to the 2016 Patriots. They were 7th in total yards, 3rd in attempts, but 24th in yards on average. So something we're seeing with the 2 Patriots team that won these 3 years. Not very good in yards on average, but they're high in attempts and top 10 in total yardage.
Yeah, another thing I would like to mention, like you said, 5th in touchdowns, or I don't know if you said that, but I'll say it, 5th in touchdowns.
No, I didn't have that.
That's because they had the leading rusher in touchdowns. Like Garrett Blunt had 18, led the league in rushing touchdowns. Shout out to the Garrett Blunt. But on to passing, again, extremely good passing. 4th in yards, 6th in touchdowns. It's not really changing from the norm. Top 5 offense passing the ball. Also, they only threw 2 interceptions the entire season, which is insane. They were the best team in the league in turnover percentage. Tom Brady did not turn over the ball.
Yeah, that is insane. And then we were talking about 2015 Broncos before recording. Do you want to take a guess, or wait, are you looking and seeing where they rank in yards?
No.
They were 17th in yards, 17th in attempts, and 14th in yards on average.
Okay, let me pull that up. Yeah, for me it says 13th in yards per average,
Okay.
but they still weren't that great of a rushing team, which is surprising. Not top 10 is surprising for me. They were also by far the worst teams in interceptions. They were 28th in passing TDs, 14th in passing yards. They, like I said, 23 interceptions is nuts. They had the 6th worst turnover percentage. This was a defensive team. Nothing surprising. Nothing. They were above average, sort of, not really at running. And then passing, they were horrible. So this really was a defensive team.
Yeah. So that could be an exception if we're looking at
To
10.
all rules. To all rules.
Yeah, to all rules. Yeah. Then 2014 Patriots, they were 18th in yards, 13th in attempts, and then 23rd on yards on average.
Yeah. For the Patriots, 4th in least amount of interceptions, 5th in touchdowns, and 9th in yards. Another top 10 offense. 3rd best turnover percentage. Again, they're not turning over the ball at all. Just extremely proficient passing by Brady. And again, I would like to mention again, Brady and Mahomes are a big reason why these passing offenses are so good every year.
Yeah, and to me, that's something with attempts too earlier on with I'm not going to attempt running the ball as much when I have Mahomes throwing the ball. And same thing with Tom Brady. But that's what makes it so weird about that Patriots team in the mid 2010s is they were high in attempts.
Yeah, the reason why the 2016 team was high in attempts, Brady was out the first 4 games with a suspension.
Yes.
So it comes to backup QBs again. 4 games without Brady. Like the other 2 years for comparison, the 2014 team was 7th most in attempts, so top 10 in attempts. You have Brady. Why would you not? The other year, they were 11th in attempts, very close to top 10. The other year, 23rd in most passing attempts. Brady's out. That's what the rise in attempts is. It isn't because – I don't think it's as much because running backs are more valued. It's more we don't have the GOAT.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I'm interested in. Then we get to 2013. Is Seahawks, they won. Incredible defensive team, but also this is also the team where I think they really had a bell cow, and that was Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah, another thing I'd like to mention that we talked about before we recorded, Russell Wilson had 539 yards. So get 539 yards rushing from your QB is insane. That's why they had the second most attempts. That's why they had the fourth most yards. Another good team at not turning over the ball, sixth best. They had the 10th most touchdowns passing, third most interceptions, 26th most passing yards, 31st most attempts. So almost dead last in attempts. And that's partially because this is a second year QB, Russell Wilson. Also partially because he ran the ball a lot as well. And partially because they have a bell cow. I would say of the champions, this is the only team that has a bell cow. I know that Garrett Blount led the league in rushing touchdowns back in 2014. However, he didn't have an excess of attempts, I would say. Or was it not? No, it was 2016. My bad. 2016 was the year he had 18. He did have 1,161 yards, but he had 299 attempts, yards per game 72.6. He had average attempts per game 18.7. That's not really a crazy amount when you think of Marshawn Lynch, who had I guess the same amount. So I guess that's also a bell cow, but is it really? 2016 was when Brady was out, so I think he was a bell cow without Brady. But then when Brady came back, he wasn't. Like I know he wasn't a bell cow to get them to the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah, I like where you're going because I was about to talk about this is really the end of the bell cow because if we look, like you said, and I was looking at 2012. Can you name this is a guy I consider the bell cow of the Ravens when they won in 2012? I know it wasn't part of our stats,
Ray Rice,
but yes.
and on the other side, Frank Gore.
Yeah. So I think we're seeing kind of the peak of the bell cow, and then now this is kind of leading up to running back by committee because I think the Patriots really started it, and then teams started copying them, and now we're at this point.
Yeah, ever since 2016, the Patriots really have adopted, and even in 2016, they had multiple 100-yard rushers. But in 2016, they really adopted after 2016, they really adopted a trial by committee. And I do think that's what Brady likes because he likes those passing running backs. Even in 2016, James White had 551 receiving yards as a runner, while LeGarrette Blount only had 7 receptions all year.
Yeah, so from what I'm curious what you think about this, but from this kind of tells me earlier on and during the middle of the 2010s, rushing yards, the teams that won were high in rushing yards, high in attempts. But lately, it seems like teams aren't really getting a lot of total yardage, not getting a lot of yards on attempt. They're higher in passing, which for me, if I want a running back, I might do the running back by committee because I want a running back that can help me in the passing game the most.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if I'd go that far to say the teams in the early had a lot of attempts because, again, I think it can be pointed. Like, I'm not going to say the Patriots had a lot of attempts I don't think that's the Patriot way necessarily. I think that's more Brady was out. And when Brady was out, they were running the ball a lot because that's how they systematically do it. And I'd say the same thing with the Eagles. I would say that yes, the Seahawks were a running team. I will 100% say that.
Yeah. And if I could rephrase it, they were middle tier running teams. Now they're kind of in the bottom third the past 4 years.
Besides the Chiefs, who were probably a top 10 running team last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just to rephrase it. So I don't know.
Yeah. That's probably a better way to put it. I would say that I wouldn't even look at necessarily running back situation. I think this more shows offense versus defense. When you have the 2013, when you don't have a Brady or Mahomes, every year you have an outstanding defense that wins. When you go to the Seahawks, outstanding defense. Obviously the Broncos, the Eagles, a great defense that year. They were against the run, the best rushing defense in the league. In both in yards, they only allowed 1,200 or 1,267 to be exact. While they almost ran for 1,000 more yards than they allowed, which is insane.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Because defense, I just think we're kind of reaching the point where we've kind of talked about lately, and something I noticed in 2012 when I was just briefing at it. I'm assuming you can tell me who the MVP was.
What were you?
2012. 2012
20
NFL MVP.
Adrian Peterson.
Yes. I believe that was the last running back that was MVP. Now it's kind of going to quarterback, and to me, it's become a very much passing league.
I see what you're going with, but also Derrick Henry 2 years ago ran for 2,000 yards.
Yeah, but he didn't win MVP.
I would argue that's because Rodgers had one of the best passing seasons ever.
Okay.
48 touchdowns, 5 picks is insanity. Like, that's just, can you beat that? Even if we're giving it to QB, like, QB has an advantage. But if Rodgers has the season he had in 2022 where he still wins it, I think Derrick Henry wins.
Okay. Yeah, it was kind of a mid quarterback class or just MVP class. But yeah, that's a good point with Derrick Henry. Just to me, it seems like we're focusing, a lot of teams are focusing on passing. And until someone, I think we could see a change and where running backs just, like if the Falcons really run the ball and go far, then that could change. What?
I think everything really changes with the 2007 Patriots. I think that's what does it. When everyone sees how great that offense is passing the ball, I think that's the first instance where teams were like, we got to start airing out. Like, we can't just keep running the ball while Tom Brady's throwing 75-yard touchdowns in one play to Randy Moss.
Yeah, that is a good point. Because to me, Patriots were mostly the trendsetters because they were always winning Super Bowls.
Or in them.
Or yeah,
at least.
Yeah. And we didn't do finalists. I kind of just want to do a brief, small look at championships. And then we did 10 years. But yeah, I'm interested in running backs. I do think if you can get a valuable running back that can help you in the passing game, that would help because they're an extra wide receiver.
I do think it. This is just a joke, by the way, but I do think it helps that you didn't look at finalists partially because the Eagles were the best rushing team in the league last year. So
yeah, and then yeah, that is true. But they didn't win, and I'm wondering. I think the Niners were like top 3 too.
Yeah, running is important. The problem is how you're running, and the fact that you have Jalen Hurts, and the fact that you had Miles Sanders, like that's a duo. Or you look at Debo and Christian McCaffrey. Like, there's different ways to do it. But finance would be a much different look. Because you go back to the Niners in 2019, they were second in yards, first in touchdowns. And that's where you really said it switched in 2018. Well, the Niners should have won that Super Bowl if Jimmy Garoppolo could hit a Hail Mary pass to Emmanuel Sanders when no one was in 20 yards of him. But running the ball can still win you games. That's still my opinion. It's just, how do you run? Is it with one guy or is it with a committee?
Yes, that's a great way to put it. I do think you have to be efficient running the ball.
I think a team could be first in running and win the Super Bowl easily, like last year with the Eagles. But the problem is they're not running the ball with one person. Even though Miles Sanders is definitely running the ball a lot last year. Like he had a good bit of attempts, 15.2 per game, which was one of the highest in the league. He had 1,269 yards. Jalen Hurts also had 760. And Kenneth Gainwell still had 240. And Boston Scott had 217.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I just think if a team has a bell cow and they win the Super Bowl, then I think we'll see teams start going that way.
The only team... There's only 2 teams I think have a chance of bell cowing their way. And that's the Titans because they added D-Hop. And I still like their defense with 100%. They won the best D-lines in the league still. They would have some hurdles, but if they could bell cow it because Derrick Henry is still that good. And Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey is just... insane. And if the Chargers could ever figure out what they're doing, I think Eckler could also do it. I put him in that upper echelon of running backs. But is he really? It depends on what your definition of bell cow is, because Eckler touches the ball 20 times a game. It's just not running. It's also getting 10 receptions.
Yeah, to me, Eckler is a guy I would try to aim for because he helps me in the passing game a lot.
Yeah, I would still consider him a bell cow because a lot of the receptions he gets are out of the backfield. But him having 107 receptions with 204 rushing attempts, that's, if you count targets, which you really should, 127 and 204, that's more than bell cow running backs got a couple of years ago, like 10 years ago. That's the average bell cow. So Eckler really is that type of bell cow player, but he's just a modern version of it.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I like that. Same thing with McCaffrey. But yeah, I do agree. If the Titans win the Super Bowl, then we could see a lot change. But yeah, that's all I got. Yeah, I'm intrigued, and this was a fun deep dive. Maybe we can go another 10 years sometime. What? Any other thoughts, Austin?
I'd love that, Kevin.
That'd be great. All right, we'll put it on the schedule. That's all we got. Thank you for listening to Outsiders Opinions.